All right, well, thank you. Definitely want to give a very big thank you to our organizers. The events like this that we have all over the world, the load for putting these on, organizing the content, the sponsors, everything, we have an incredible set of volunteers all over who are working on that. So I just want to say thank you to Lisa Marie, Ray, Jason, Natalie, and our sponsors as well for making this possible. Give them a round of applause. This is the 10-year anniversary of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and we are in the Computer History Museum. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of Cloud Native, as well as look at where I think we're going to have some of the biggest ongoing impact with our community and with our technologies, and how they tie into the topic du jour, which is, of course, artificial intelligence and AI. So the Cloud Native Computing Foundation started 10 years ago, as of a couple of months ago now, in July of 2015. This was a new foundation that got launched at OSCON in July of 2015 with a focus on a new model that was emerging for how applications were built and deployed. A big focus around containers, but also some of the other elements that were becoming much more prominent in application architectures around observability and microservices and those kinds of things. The CNCF was announced, formed up pretty quickly with a governance model, and had an initial board meeting in December of that year at the New York Times building. That was a cool meeting where there was a lot of discussion about strategy, various opinions about what cloud native should look like. Should it be really kind of focused on one or a small number of projects, or should it be something that was a bigger initiative and a bigger community? We can see what happened. And eventually, shortly thereafter, Kubernetes was accepted as the first project. These are the original governing board and TOC members. I don't see any of them here in this room, but some of them may be here today. You know, we should also, you know, give them a thanks if we see them. It was a big effort at the beginning. Some big personalities, big questions, lots of debates and strategy sessions to kind of carve the Cloud Native Foundation into a blank space back then that has really endured and grown, as we'll see in a minute. Today, there's about 250,000 contributors, close to 300,000 now, that have participated in a Cloud Native project. That is really an incredible number to think about. These contributors are in basically every country in the world, 190 different countries, and have done an insane amount of technical work, over 3 million code commits, 1.2 million pull requests, and many, many millions of other contributions in the forms of documentation, governance processes, and those types of activities. And this is really what has taken that kind of start from those initial group of people who were kicking this idea off and turned it into what it is today. Kubernetes, now 11 years old, is basically the second most active open source project in the world, behind Linux. And that's a pretty enduring track record to have that amount of activity continuing on to this day. If we look at the kind of core group of maintainers, there's 1,500 maintainers. This is a heat map of where they are. I mentioned that it's very global. This is one of my favorite aspects of the work that we do, is getting to travel around the world and meet CNCF maintainers all over. Contributors, these are the nearly 300,000. You can see again all over the world. We have gone from one KubeCon to this year we're having 5 KubeCons. In addition to the North America and the EU KubeCons, we had KubeCons in China, Japan, and India this year. You'll notice there's an India-shaped section on the heat map. This is a region that has gotten very, very active, and the KubeCon that we had there just a little over a month ago was amazing, sold out at just over 4,000 attendees, and the energy was extremely high. The sessions were awesome, a lot of super technical sessions, and so you know, the global nature of this community is something that is really cool to see. You know, the backdrop, I'll go through these next slides kind of quickly, but the backdrop of how all of this came along really goes back a couple of decades to the start of taking computers and dividing them into subparts with virtualization and early containerization. And that gave rise to the first wave of cloud technologies. Lisa Marie talked about OpenStack. We had PaaS systems. We obviously had the hyperscale cloud providers that came along. And really, through that process, we were kind of innovating in a lot of new directions to get away from having applications tied to physical servers, to physical storage systems, and physical networking systems, and being able to have our infrastructure be something that's more closely aligned with what we want our development teams to orient themselves around, how we want them to architect applications, monitor them, scale them, make sure they're reliable and performant. And that's really, I think, to me, where a lot of the kernel of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation came from, was how do we bring all of those together into this new kind of architecture. So we talked about 2015, it was started. Kubernetes came in as the first project. Prometheus followed shortly thereafter. The Prometheus project is actually, I think, older than Kubernetes, but it was adopted into the CNCF as the second kind of official project. Dan Kohn became the first executive director. He passed a few years ago, but his impact on the community and the foundation is still felt in these kinds of events. He kicked off a lot of the programs that we see today that are still running throughout the community. And then as we go forward, we had container format wars. We saw those start to get resolved and standardized. We had different types of packaging that came along. We had serverless. We had new models that were all coming in and entering the landscape for how applications could be deployed. And then I think a really big step was when we saw some of the standardization around observability with the OpenTelemetry project. And OpenTelemetry, or OTel, as you might hear it called, is actually the second most active project in Cloud Native today. So this is a project that really got kicked off 5 or 6 years ago, but has continued to grow in momentum and is having a really big impact as we see just this is an absolutely necessary element of all modern applications. How are you going to not just monitor the systems, but understand at a deep level what's driving behaviors or misbehaviors in your application and your infrastructure? How do you tie that together with kind of the behaviors of your users and the larger environment that all of it exists in? So you know, if you are looking for something to get involved in the cloud native world, in addition to Kubernetes and Prometheus and those kinds of things, OTel, really active space right now, a good one to dig into. eBPF was another step towards kind of extending the power of cloud native applications and tying closer into the underlying systems. And then where I think we see a lot of focus these days is around AI. Kubeflow came along in 2023. It had a lot of initial focus around ML ops and how do we run these types of training systems. It has a lot of plugins now for a whole range of elements, but we see that more and more the components of AI systems are getting deeply integrated into the cloud native set of projects. So DRA and Kubernetes, which is kind of how can we get better, more flexible access to hardware accelerators like GPUs, an ecosystem of cloud-native AI tools and services, and more innovation where we see people actually taking AI systems to production. So that's actually kind of one of the things that I want to dig into a little bit more here, is sort of what is happening right now with AI and open source, and what is the connection with the cloud-native ecosystem. If you go back a year or year and a half, a lot of people thought that open source AI was not going to happen. All of the news in AI was around ChatGPT and OpenAI. To some extent, some of the Google models, Anthropic, everything was proprietary, and people thought that the only way that you could really achieve that level of quality in an AI system was to have these massive capital expenditures and these huge training runs, and that nobody in the open source world was ever going to be able to get there. DeepSeek came along at the end of last year, beginning of 2025, and has really switched the entire approach and narrative around AI to something where open source is hugely front and center at all levels of it. And since then, we've seen a whole rash of other open source models that have come out, including from OpenAI. But we've also seen a lot of other pieces of the open source AI world becoming more mature, and I think that's where cloud native really comes into play. With cloud native AI, I think that what we see is a huge opportunity to do what our community does best, which is to run complex systems with high performance, high reliability, in a way where we can observe them, scale them, and get the most out of them. You know, these AI systems are pretty complex at every stage. We're just now entering the world of large-scale and widely deployed inference systems, as well as agents. And I think we're going to dive into agents in the next talk. But I think that the technologies, and more importantly, the people and the skills that we have in the cloud-native community are uniquely fit to what the challenges of running AI systems are. When I think about AI, and especially open source AI, I think that there are sort of three pillars that I organize them in my head to understand them and kind of put things into a place. There's training, there's inference, and there's agents. And if we look at the training space, there are some really mature projects like TensorFlow and PyTorch. I think PyTorch has something like 80% market share at the training stage. And this is where we take data, we turn it into models. Inference is where we take those models and we serve them to answer questions, make predictions, interact with other systems. Here we have a lot of open source, but it's a very much, I would say, kind of a Wild West, piece it together yourself kind of environment. And there are runtimes like VLLM, Onyx, there are elements in the CNCF world already. There are some that are kind of coming onto the scene, like AI Bricks, which comes out of ByteDance, LLMD, which Red Hat and other partners announced earlier this year. But this, to me, I think is where there's a massive, massive opportunity. Inference is going to be the biggest workload in human history. It's going to run more machines on more machines than anything else we've ever come up with. And when you look at the analyst predictions of where people are going to be spending money over the next decade, we're talking about trillions of dollars of investment going into infrastructure to run inference systems. And this is where I think there's a huge opportunity for the cloud native community to create the best models to do these types of operations. Again, this is what I think you see in our history that we've done before. Agents, brand new. You know, this has been getting a lot of hype this year to the point where everything is now an agent. Even, you know, is it an agent? I don't know. The way I think of agents, though, this is about connecting models, humans, tools, other agents, and kind of extending the intelligence that comes out of models into more and more systems. Now, that's very powerful, which means that we have a long way to go before we solve problems like security and observability, and you know, we see the right way to kind of do this at scale. We're starting to see frameworks and protocols emerge here. Some of the ones that I think are starting to get traction are things like MCP, A2A, Agent Gateway. And again, these are all circling kind of around our community. What I think we need to do is look at how do we take these, turn them into a coherent stack in the same way that we have with other systems. How do we standardize the open source components? How do we work on these openly in the community? If you look at the largest proprietary inference systems in the world, you'll see that most of them are running Kubernetes and other cloud-native technologies under the hood. But we're not talking about this and collaborating on how these companies and these systems are getting to that scale for their inference and for their overall operations. I think this is a big opportunity for the CNCF. If you look at training, inference, and agents, each of those areas, big benefits to applying cloud-native methodologies and projects into the operations model there. And I think what I fundamentally believe will happen, and what we see over and over again, is that open source will win in all of these areas, but we have to work together. And if we want it to win sooner, and if we want it to win in a way where that's more broadly available for all people, then we need to start working on these together. There are some groups within the CNCF, some community groups that are forming up right now to tackle these challenges and these opportunities. So I would encourage you to go look for the different AI working groups and get involved if this is something that interests you. I think it's going to be fundamental to where we go in the next 10 years. Now, where do we go in the next couple of months? I'll close with a call to action, which is, if you want to dive deeper into all of the topics you hear about today over the course of several days and engage directly with maintainers and community leaders and companies, our next KubeCon is going to be in Atlanta, starting November 10th. Please join us there and continue the conversation around cloud native. So thanks again to the organizers. Thanks to all of you for joining us here, and hope we get to chat and you all have a fabulous day here at KCD Bay Area.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much. Awesome.